You have to put the unmute yourself, sir. Sen sab, unmute yourself.
Shamiran, you are muted. Shamiran, you are muted.
Shamiran, unmute karo.
Yeah.
Is it being shown as mute?
Now you are unmuted.
Hello.
Sir, now you are.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes.
Narinder.
Okay.
Shamiran, you can start.
Okay, good. Sorry, I can't see myself. Can you see me? Can you?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Everybody can see you.
Except
If you don't
myself.
see yourself, doesn't matter.
Okay, doesn't matter. Okay. Okay, thank you. A very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to invite you to this interesting webinar, which is being organized by CEAI and Builders Association of India. The topic of the webinar is, as you all know, challenges in engineering project delivery with focus on pandemic situation, way forward. We expect that the event to last about 2 hours and would request all of you to stay back till the end as we intend to wrap up with some kind of a conclusion. To start with, I request CEI President Dr. Ajay Pradhan to say a few words in the way of opening remarks. Dr.
Thank you, Mr. Sen. Good evening and welcome everyone participating in this webinar on, as you mentioned, the challenges in engineering project delivery with focus on pandemic situation. Let me thank all my colleagues and especially Mr. Sen, the chairman of CII's Eastern and Northeastern Regional Center, for organizing this webinar. I heartily welcome all eminent speakers and panelists who will be sharing their knowledge and experiences in managing their respective business situation amidst this pandemic. Today we have with us Mr. R.K. Pandey, member, National Highway Authority of India. Mr. Ajib Gulab Chandanji, he is the chairman of HCC Limited. Mr. Amitabh Datta, past president of CI Eastern Region. Mr. Kalyan Ghosh, my friend Mr. D.P. Mathuria, Executive Director Technical at the National Mission for Clean Ganga, Minister of Water Resources. Mr. Indoria is member and former DG of Roads, Minister of Road Transport Highways. Mr. Basu, and Mr. Amitabh Ghosal, who is very much instrumental in organizing this event as well. He is also past president of CI and a past chairman of Eastern region. Just to brief about Consulting Engineer Association of India, which is called CAI, which is the apex body of consulting engineers in India. It represents the Indian engineering consultancy professionals at the International Federation of Consulting Engineers, which is called FIDIC. CI is the voice of consultants and consulting engineering companies of India, and it has 60 years of accumulated knowledge and experience behind it. As we all passing through this pandemic, there are various guidelines and protocols have been promulgated nationally and internationally since beginning of the 2020 that organization in crafting their response and operations for COVID-19, which poses minimal risk to their business and for their business in terms of projects, planning, designing, including construction stages. We have observed that many additional risk mitigation measures that have been put in place by most of the organization since the outbreak. And thus, there is a three-phase approach of minimizing this impact, which is on scheduling of the projects, favoring of a virtual work as much as possible, while maintaining ability to respond rapidly to needs on-site support and on-site work. Therefore, the new priorities schedule has been evolved over the last 1.5 years or so for many ongoing projects, which are based on the proportional to the risk and the prioritization. That's what is happening. COVID-19 also affects all those who work, especially in the service sectors. But personally, for me, I work in water sector, which is river valley projects, flood management, water supply, sanitation, wastewater, irrigation, and so on and so forth. But the operational aspects of those projects like water supply, sanitation, wastewater, it provides a greater challenge for the people, those who are operators, those who are also working on the site for operating those services or the utilities. I don't know how much financial benefits or relief have given to our fraternity, but I think that's the sector that's the segment which most of the countries in the world, Australia, US, and other European countries supported their fraternity or engineering, consulting, and contracting organizations in different ways. But I think this is what I would like to hear from our learned colleagues and those who are already working on this. The lessons which we have learned during the response phase must be reviewed and revisited to enhance the resilience of services that we offer. It is too early for us to lower the guard during the recovery phase, as many factors and risks contribute to the uncertainty around full pandemic exit. We still have to live with that. So therefore, rebuilding a more sustainable and resilience for engineering services delivery could broadly, if you look at, into three levels. One is preventing and responding to the future health crisis, adopting appropriate digital technologies, increasing the resilience for long-term sustainability through additional force measure, mechanism including financial support or contingency should be built into the system. As we move to normal, I just quote from the G7, build back better and build back to when you reach to the new normal for excellent service delivery. And therefore, we have to live with this pandemic, or this is not going to get away. The reason being, the occurrence of such disease or outbreaks is expected to increase with the increase in the climate change variability, urbanization, environmental imbalances that give rise to both the emergence of novel pathogens and re-emergence of infections that were once controlled, but unprecedented population growth with accelerated rates of antimicrobial resistance, which my colleague Mr. Mathuria probably talk about in the Ganga case, have resulted in both the emergence of novel pathogen organism and the re-emergence of such infectious disease which once were controlled. I'm sure and confident that the presentations, deliberations will address lessons learned during this last 1.5 years or so. And therefore, we'll have some key takeaway as to how organizations have faced the challenges in delivering services during this pandemic. Thank you all. Mr. Samiran, back to you, please.
Thank you, Dr. Pradhan, Mr. President. Now, let me get down to the program itself. Allow me to set the stage for with a brief introduction of the theme. Before that, I'll introduce myself very briefly. I'm Shomiron Sen. I'm the chairman of the Eastern and the Northeastern region of CEAI. As far as professional career is concerned, suffice it to say that I retired as the executive director of Consulting Engineering Services as the head of the Roads and Highway Division in the East. And during that time, I can claim that I have participated, though maybe in a very small measure, in the path-breaking NHDP, having been associated with NHAI from 1999, from its Maharani Bagh days. It was a great experience to evolve with this organization and the program, being part of the team setting the standards for design as well as contracts over about 15 years. About the event, we believe that the theme is most relevant today under the prevailing circumstances and expect an animated and wide-ranging participation from all who are present. A hitherto unknown virus called COVID-19 has wreaked havoc in a global scale to the business of infrastructure development, like most other areas. There has been disruptions and loss in every sphere of life for everyone without any exception. The pandemic has affected the economy of the country, which was in any case struggling with demand side problems and sluggish growth even before 2020. We all are aware that no activity rejuvenates an economy as much as accelerated development of physical infrastructure because of its multiplier effect. Government of India has rightly identified this need and has drawn up the National Infrastructure Pipeline, NIP, with the aim of investing a stupendous 110 trillion rupees, which translates to USD 1.4 trillion in the next 5 years. At the heart of this massive developmental program are the engineering disciplines and the complex delivery system. The efficiency of the engineering fraternities can make or break this ambitious nation-building program. That is why we have amongst us today stalwarts from the fundamental entities or stakeholders constituting the project development process. The proponent, that is the clients, the constructor, and the tie-in between the consulting engineers to highlight the issues plaguing the project delivery mechanism and suggest ways to overcome those impediments in a coordinated and concerted manner ASAP. This is a tall order considering the quagmire we find ourselves in right now in the pandemic-ravaged environment. Okay, without further ado, let me now invite the first speaker of the evening, Mr. R.K. Pandey, who is the member projects. NHAI, vastly experienced in implementing NHDP for so many years. He will present his views from the perspective of the client. Mr. Pandey, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Sen, and good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly and loudly.
Yes, we can hear you.
Friends, as Dr. Sen said, I represent the highway sector, and this is one of the sectors which did very good during last few years, including the COVID period. Before coming to the challenges, just for the information of the audience who are not aware of the program, I would like to say that NHDP, we are at the fag end of the NHDP, and a new program, an ambitious program for development of the national highway, which is the responsibility of the central government, has been launched. And this program in the first phase covers development of around 35,000 kilometers of national highway. It includes the balance part of the NHDP. And this program was launched in October 17, and first phase was supposed to be completed by 2022. Of course, when it was launched, it was slightly delayed, and we have already awarded more than 20,000 kilometers of road. Our pace will continue, and we'll complete the project by 2025. Last year, if we'll see that the progress, we have created history. Including NHAI, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, is constructing around 37 kilometers a day. it is not only construction of per day. During last year, we have created 3 important, world record. It is in the field of construction of concrete road as well as the bituminous roads. Our pace will continue. Coming to the challenges, two type of challenges. One is the generic challenges which we were facing in the past as well and continuing till today. And number 2, added challenges because of the position created by the COVID. The challenges which are generic in nature are the land acquisition and the pre-construction activities. Of course, there has been a lot of improvement and systems have been streamlined and we have taken care, but at the same time, what we have decided is that we will not award the work until and unless we have completed our homework on these 2 fronts, and until we have 90% of the land available in our hand, we will not award the work. So as far as the industry is concerned, it is not the challenge for them, it is a challenge for us. Coming to the challenges created by COVID, there is no ready-made recipe. Of course, we have adopted 2-pronged strategy. Number 1 is to move towards the digital, adopt digital technology as part of our day-to-day work. I can tell you, moment the COVID started, as far as our work is concerned, we started working digitally. All our meetings through VC and all those. The moot point is we adopted it very successfully. And in the month of May last year, when COVID started, we could make payment of 10,000 crore without going to the office. That is the way we adopted and successfully continued with our office work. Coming to the project side. The project side, the impact was not, it cannot be, it varies from project to project. Say, for example, in one particular project where it was in the contaminated zone, we'll have to get the permission from the local administration and get the work started. But the other project, yes, work started, but it was getting supplies from the outside the state, which are affected from the, which are affected from the COVID. So it is not the getting permission at one area, but to get permission from the other. And the extreme cases, we'll have to have some material from the Germany. It means I'll have to have permission for even international travel. So our response depended upon the kind of situation, and it gives me a lot of satisfaction to say that within a period of 1 month, we could start work in 70% of our project. Of course, when I say we started the work in 70% of our project, it doesn't mean that it was with the full swing. Yes, they were working with lesser efficiency. It is not because of a particular situation, but because of, multiplicity of the problem, including labor left the site, generating kind of confidence in the labor to come back and start working. To mitigate this kind of problems, what we did is we have given a lot of support to the contractor and the consultant. To say a few, in our projects, the payments are stage-based, that you'll complete a particular stage, then I'll make payment. Realizing very well that to reach that stage, today you'll need more time than the time stipulated in the contract. We started releasing payment beyond the stages specified, means on the basis of the actual work done, irrespective of the stage where you have reached, we made payment. Knowing fully well that liquidity is a problem, we have given a lot of concession to the contractor and concessionaire towards giving them relief, which includes that reduction in the performance security, which included that release of retention money. This included that direct payment to the subcontractor, etc. And it has paid the dividend. And because of all these efforts, we could achieve the kind of results which I told you, that 37 kilometers a day. Not only this, we were liberal in giving extension of time. And these extension of time were delegated to our field units, who can, on the basis of the judgment of the area, can give extension of time to the contractor and the consultant. Of course, on one side, where we have given all these concession, it has given us good result, but it has some, minus side as well. Say today, when I have exempted payment of bid security, I am getting all kind of bids, and sometimes it appears to us that it may not be a serious bid. So those kind of issue we are struggling, and of course somebody may say that he is the person who is willing to come forward and carry out the work at the lowest cost. What is the problem to the NHAI in accepting all these bids? Of course, there's no problem, but we are more bothered about completion of the project rather than awarding the project. So that is why the concern is, and all those issues are being debated and will come out some kind of safeguard to take care of this kind of situation. This is very specific to the COVID situation. It is not only the COVID, but there are other challenges as well. Today, road building is not simple road building. A highway engineer, when we started our career, a highway engineer, if he knows bitumen and aggregate, he is a good highway engineer. Today, it is not so. Apart from highway engineer, he should know everything. When I say everything means he should be a financial expert as well, because over a period of time, you have seen that building road is not in the government domain. It has come out of it, and we are developing our roads through the private sector. So he should be a financial expert as well. When I'm saying I'm constructing 37 kilometers of road per day, just imagine the kind of material required. I'll tell you, in one of my projects, I needed 10,000 tons of aggregate per day. Can we have this kind of pace, and how long? It means I'll have to preserve, I'll have to take care of environment also. It is not the environment, it's not the financing. Think of when we launched NSDP, the whole vision was to construct good 4-lane road. But after constructing 4-lane road, of course, we have saved some time, but speed increased, mobility increased, leading to accidents. And today, unfortunately, we are leading in the number of fatalities on road. What we'll have to do is we'll have to take care of road safety as well. To take care of road safety, we have changed our whole, philosophy of development of road. The last issue is when we have taken up such an ambitious program, do we have people available in the field to implement such kind of program? Friends, I would like to just remind you, during last 6 months, we have witnessed 6 big accidents leading to collapse of structures. We are, of course, trying to investigate where we have gone wrong, what we'll have to do it, but it is an area of real concern for all of us. As far as NHAI is concerned, we are depending upon outsource model. When I say outsource model, our projects are prepared by the consultant and then executed by the contractor, supervised by the consultant. So when I'll have to think, I'll have to address all these issues, I'll have to take all the stakeholders along with us. This is the first views from my side. If you have something, I would like to clarify during the question answer session. Thank you, and I would like to hand over my back to Dr. Sen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. That was very illustrative. You highlighted that along with the tremendous effort of building 37 kilometers per day of highways, it comes with a lot of negatives, like collapse of structures because of hurried execution, and also you have problems with people who, the highway engineers who have to be all-rounders nowadays, because a highway building, the road building nowadays is an economic activity rather than engineering activity. And good to hear that NHAI and the government is adopting new technologies, digital technologies for payment and making life easier for the contractors to concessional EOT, bid security exemption, etc. Thank you, Mr. Pandey, and then we'll come back to you at the question and answer, or as we feel your intervention is necessary. Now I'll invite Mr. Ajit Gulabchan, the redoubtable CMD of the highly reputed Hindustan Construction Limited. It's a name to reckon with in the construction industry for decades. Mr. Gulabchan, please. You are muted, sir. You are muted.
Hello, yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samiran Sen. It is a privilege to be participating as a panelist in this wonderful webinar. It is my job today to present you a case for the construction industry, what challenges it faces, and what are its pain points in dealing with those challenges. We must understand the volume, the hugeness of the task that we have undertaken. Take NHI, for example, is the largest road building program ever undertaken in the world, and it is being conducted regularly. So there will be naturally some problems, and we are not discussing only those. The objective of this discussion is that we must get both the capacity right and the conditions of doing work in such a manner that it makes it possible for us to do the work swiftly, resolving our problems as we go along and making things happen. So it is with the objective of making things happen on time and safely, as well as with quality, is that I speak. Now, when it comes to this, you will find that you have a huge program. The Prime Minister has repeatedly announced 100 lakh crores of rupees worth infrastructure pipeline is in the offing. This is huge. And this requires, therefore, building capacity to build it. And it's a very important aspect. And building capacity doesn't mean just the ability to build it, but to build safe structures, build them swiftly, maintain quality. They must be operationally also very, very, very effective. And therefore, from all points of view, building capacity is going to be not just once, but a continuous program that will run side by side in order to deliver this huge order. But to do that, there are many, many conditions, challenges, and many pain points. First of all, as far as we're not just discussing here only roads. We're also discussing hydroelectric projects. We're discussing airports. We're discussing all kinds of infrastructure, as well as in certain cases, even buildings. But we will stay with the government jobs, and therefore basically infrastructure. So in this context, one finds that the government is very tardy in making its payments. When I say it's tardy in making its payment, not that it doesn't pay its bills every month when they are presented, at the end of the day, a construction tender is an estimate. And many things happen during the period of construction, which cause cost overruns, time overruns, etc. And these need to be quantified and costed and paid immediately. Otherwise, they cause a serious cash flow disruption. And this is not good for any contract to be executed, not good for the players in it, because this then skews the entire risk against the contractor. And I think this is very important to understand. And there was a time in this country, the engineer to the contract recommended a payment and it was paid. Only the party that was aggrieved, whether it is too much or too little, went on to arbitration, and then the matter got decided. But some immediate payment was made, and therefore cash flow suffering was very, very minimal. And in this context today, every payment goes all the way through arbitration, and then challenges in courts. So it can take anywhere near even 8 to 10 years before you can see the money. And it is always felt that this is contractors' money, but it isn't. The contractors, the profit in that is what is the contractor's money. The rest of it is the bankers, the employees, the MSMEs that are the supply chain to the contracts. There are several other suppliers of equipment as well as materials that are there. The services supplies are there. All these people have invested the money in it. And when there is a cost overrun, that cost is incurred by all of them. And this cost, if you not repaid on time, it disrupts their cash flow cycle. You must always remember that construction companies by design all over the world are always undercapitalized. While they build the facility, you can just see the owner of that facility has a huge task of raising equity and debt to build that facility. That is the value of work that you have to carry out there. And that carrying out that value of work requires a certain element. It can't put in the money that the owner puts in. So in that context, it must be remembered that you can't pass on the risk of financing the project indirectly by not making payments to him on time. And this has caused a big disruption in the construction industry. There are lots of players, many new people come, but you find that the path that they take finally leads to the same issues. Yes, there have been certain good ideas about how to conciliate and settle the issue rather than go through arbitrations. And I must say, by and large, NHI has tried to follow many good things, but it's not enough. It must always remember that it is a dominant player in this whole contracting system. As government, you have dominance. Sitting there, you have dominance. So the bargaining power of the other side is very, very low. And therefore, an element of just and fair system is absolutely important. So in order to do that, we recommend that we need to relook at our contract conditions and make the distribution of risk a little fairer. This I'm talking of the construction contracts, the EPC contracts. And when it comes to this, we have almost stopped doing any BOT contracts, except in airports or ports. But if we want to enlist private sector and their investment also into infrastructure, then there too we will need the concession agreement to be fairer. For example, today, you have a concession agreement that talks of a total project cost, which is so much less than the final cost on which you sign off. The lenders, advisors also, as well as and the bid is awarded to a party, and therefore it is approved in a way by the owner. And yet, if something goes wrong, the owner will only pay the total project cost as worked out by them, and therefore there's a gap. And because of this gap, the bank lenders always want a certain comfort from the sponsors of the project, and that reduces the fundamental principle of project financing for such projects. The recourse must only be to the project, and we haven't been able to successfully bring that about. The moment you bring that about, you will see a lot more players coming in, not only in India, but abroad as well. Very few foreigners are there in the risk-taking part of construction. Most of them are there when the project is complete, even if it's a BOT, when it's complete and is earning annuities and it gets established in 3-4 years' time. That's when a number of foreign financial institutions want to buy that. So this tells you that why isn't anybody prepared to take a risk in construction? It's not that big a risk, but because of the skewed nature of our risk sharing, the dominant position of the owner, which is the government, therefore dictates things which are onerous for people to follow. All this has scared away many foreign companies from participating here. Otherwise, you can get a lot of money into our infrastructure from abroad as well as from India. The next important thing that we see is the amount of guarantees that you're required to give to the owners in this country is enormous. 10% for performance, 10% for advance guarantee, to 5% retention, and then if there's equipment, some more guarantees. Plus, when payment needs to be made after arbitration, awards are given, again you have to give a guarantee to get your own money. This amounts to almost somewhere between 25 to 45% of the value of the contract to be given as a guarantee. This is way too high. If you're going to build 100 lakh crores, you will need about 25 lakh to 40 lakh crore worth of guarantees to be given. The Indian banking system does not have the strength to do that. So something else to be done, and this amount brought down to not more than 5 to 10% of the total value. Earlier, before guarantees were there, retention deposit of 5, maximum 10% was good enough to carry out the work, and the client felt assured. I think there's got to be a bigger trust between the two in order to make things happen. And I think this calls for a certain change so that you can do this. As far as the advance guarantee is concerned, why do we have to give an advance? Why can't we convert mobilization into an item of work which is paid? And once that is paid, there is no need to go through this whole accounting process and interest building of advance payments not adjusted. If you see, they always call it adjustment of that money. It is never repayment of advance. It is not a loan, it's a prepayment. And therefore, instead of doing a prepayment, you could perhaps move on to making mobilization an item of work. This brings down the number of guarantees required drastically, reduces the strain on the banking system, reduces the strain on the contract, and we stay honest to the program. The next important thing is that we've seen in this last few years, a number of bank guarantees being encashed, only encashed because of the clause of without pay, without DEMA. Yes, it must be paid without DEMA once it is established that the encashment is now necessary and should be done. This is not there. We have seen clients in this country encash guarantees of advance, even though half the advance is paid back or adjusted. The full advance guarantees are encashed. So there's a lot of pressure being put. The extensions of time don't come on time. The settlement of dues doesn't come on time. And then penalties are levied. So a whole cycle of not so very nice things gets into place, and therefore you have problems. And all these problems compound each other to create the delays and the cost overruns that we are now looking at. Most of the big amounts that you're seeing are all interest burden. So in this context, we need to have a superior system. Go back to trusting the engineer when he gives a verdict on a claim made by somebody, and make sure that this is paid on time so that you can go on, not suffocate the project for cash flow. Having done this, this is what is important, even in case of BOT projects, or where you really need the public-private partnership for investment into it. You will notice that it will need long-term money. We can't rely only on the Indian banks to give you money for long-term. And this is a very important aspect. Everywhere in the world, you can get 10-year, 20-year, 30-year money. We don't have, unfortunately, the depth of Indian markets to create bonds that will give you that length of money. The advantage of bonds is that when you get that money, the original lender does not have to stay invested. He can always sell it out and somebody else will buy it. But the borrower gets the full time and it doesn't have to pay back quickly. Once a bank gives, you have to pay back the bank quickly. So these structural changes in putting the financing of projects together is extremely important. And you must remember that all, the owner, the concessionaire, and the lender will sign off on the same price. So the recourse is only to the project. So it is extremely important for us to understand on a broad scale that there is both a challenge and a pain point. And we have seen government agencies continuously challenge every item. Even if you want to take the money out for which is given to you, they again challenge it and delay the payment. It's become a culture. And that culture is bad for growth. Culture is bad for efficient and effective building of infrastructure in the country. We would all like to cooperate. We're taking the risk, but don't put the whole risk onto the contractor. It is time that we share the risk fairly to whom it belongs. In any contracting, you notice this accepted clauses are on the owner. Because I've heard this talk with COVID happening, that, oh, well, if it is a force majeure for you, it is a force majeure for us too. No, it doesn't work like that. You own the facility at the end. And when you own the facility at the end, if it is stalled for some reason, you either abandon building that facility, or you must pay the extra costs that come as a result of a calamity that's come in between. So these are features and the fundamentals of contract principles, fundamentals of fair and just contract have to be followed, obeyed, and implemented with regularity. Yes, you will say there are many contractors who do all kinds of things. We can go on blaming each other. I can show you hundreds of government agents what they do. How many people, we are all made from the same soil, and we need to understand that. So instead of creating a atmosphere of mistrust, let's trust each other, share the risks a little better, solve the problems as we go along. One of the most important things that I learned was from Mr. Gadkari of the Bombay-Pune Expressway. And I'll give you a small anecdote in order to close my talk. I was CII chairman of the Western region, and he as a PWD minister had come for a big meeting with us. And when I mentioned to him, and he said, we are going to build world-class roads and system in Maharashtra, etc. So I was a bit, I couldn't understand my cynicism, because we have been hearing it for 20 years that we're going to build world-class roads from politicians. So I said, why don't we begin with building a 5-kilometer world-class road, and then we can try and do bigger things after that. And he was offended. Then I was told by Mr. Pramod Mahajan, go and meet him. He's feeling sad because he's very sincere about what he's doing. When I met him, I realized this man, his politics is politics of development. And he said, Ajit, we are going to build this Bombay-Pune Expressway, and it will be built within the term. Now I know the 3-4 key things that happened. As the designs were made on time, wherever there was a delay, they made sure they worked double to make it happen. Payments were made on the third day of the bill being presented. Any issues that were resolved were quickly resolved and paid for. There were many such things that happened that made that possible to do that job for all the 5 contractors ahead of schedule. And the task that nobody had undertaken before. So what I'm showing you is how cooperation, equitable sharing of risk, and making payments on time so that you don't disturb the working capital cycle of contractors, that will give you the result that you want in building first-class infrastructure and on time with all the safety and quality you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Gulabchandji. It was wonderful. And you gave us some very valuable insights. And actually, the contractors represent the hands on the ground. They actually build the projects. All the planning and designs ultimately have to lead to the actual implementation where the contractors and the builders come into, and their profitability and comfort zone is of paramount importance. I think we have learned quite a few pain points, as you pointed out. I will just summarize those before I move on to the next speaker. You first flagged about the capacity constraints, which is plaguing the entire industry. Then you talked about the payment issue, tardiness in payment, which results directly in cash flow problems, which again leads to escalation of cost and delays, of course. And of course, the really important point of risk sharing and risk allocation. This is where we keep on harping. We will come to that again, that FIDIC, adopting FIDIC conditions of contract is absolutely of paramount importance, but we'll talk about that later. So risk sharing is so very important and equitable. Uh, all parties should be given the risk they are capable of handling and managing. And the dominance of the client, you have pointed out, the master-servant relation and the attitude, those days are gone. Now we have to be partners with this kind of effort that is envisaged. And you've also talked about global borrowing for long-term funds, which is inevitable. We have to build on that because the bonds, Indian bond market is not that lively and active. So we have to borrow from the global markets. And one important thing you've said, and we as consulting engineers, I found it very heartening. You said that the engineer has to be trusted. Engineer has to be trusted, and his recommendations have to be given its due importance, and the client should be able to take a decision directly on that. Thank you, Mr. Galatan. I have noted down a few more points. We'll discuss those points in the panel discussion to follow. Thank you again for this very interesting deliberation. Next, I will be inviting Kullan Ghosh. Before I ask Kullan to start, I'd like to mention a very important development which recently took place, when Honorable Minister Mr. Gadkari flagged some issue in a meeting a couple of days ago in Transport Bhavan itself, that he was very concerned and he flagged some issues regarding the performance of consultants. Namely, he talked about staffing, the quality of key professionals. He talked about the survey and data quality, deficiencies in supervision, capacity building. CEI on its own are actually addressing those issues in a separate and a very important platform. But I'm sure these points will be will feature in the discussions to follow this with the two consultants, very experienced consultants, Kullan Ghosh, who is the head of the transport division of FTISA Consultants. He's a very experienced highway engineer whom I know for many years, being part of the same organization, CES, for a pretty long time. And I'm sure he will be talking mainly on the project preparation end of the project development. And he will flag some issues and things he would suggest which should be removed, the hurdles to be removed to make the whole process seamless with the client as well as the contractor. Kullan, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Samaranda. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening to respected panelists. I am really being honored to be part of this forum and able to place some points regarding this project preparation activities. While I have been given this scope of this presentation, webinar, you can say, it is mentioned that focus on pandemic situation. Then I was really in a dilemma that shall I directly concentrate on the pandemic situations or generic issues? Because the project, there are a lot of issues and concerns from the consultant points of view that which still remains in pandemic, which was earlier than pandemic, and if it is not resolved shortly, it will further be there. So I have prepared a very small presentation, which I will put some concerns and other things. I'll just give me a minute. I will share the screen for everybody. Hope the screen is visible here.
It's visible. It's visible.
Okay. Okay. So let me put it in a presentation mode. So today's topic is challenges in engineering project delivery with focus on pandemic situation. And my part is to highlight perspective and concerns of project preparation stage from the consultant points of view. So before going to that, I just want to put 2-3 slides to mention where consultants are placed in the whole project cycle. There are authority, contractor, and consultants, who are the 3 pillars of this project cycle. And if we say a project cycle, it is from conceiving a project, then preparation of feasibility DPR to prepare tender documents, we can say project preparation, and finally the construction. Conceiving a project means it is from the planning commission and decision makers. They engage authorities like MOT, NHI, state departments. Then these departments go for the request for proposal, invite request for the proposals, and select consultants to do the feasibility and DPR projects, and prepare the help client to prepare the tender documents, bid documents, and pre-construction activities. Then construction is awarded. Contractor engages consultant as design director, and also authority also engages consultant as supervision consultants. So the project cycle, if we summarize, it is like this: that conceiving a project, then preparation of feasibility and DPR, then construction of the project, plus operation and maintenance. So authority has got authority engages consultant and engages contractors. Consultants are for advisory services. For the authority, consultants are for the advisory services, preparation of DPR and feasibility reports, project supervisions. For the contractors, consultants are playing the role of design consultant, proof consultants, as well as safety consultants. So now if we see what are this chart shows at various stages where consultants are placed. When conceiving a project, they are doing pre-feasibility study, option analysis, financial assessment advisory, fund allocations. At feasibility and DPR stage, technical advisory, feasibility study, detailed project report, bidding document, assist in land acquisition and clearances, survey investigations, etc. And in construction stage, it is detailed design, proof consultancy, safety consultancy, authority engineer, independent engineer, like these roles. Now, if we go to the specific to the design and PMC services I will not discuss here. It will be discussed in the next lecture. In detailed project report and DPR, the works we concentrate on survey investigation, traffic, geometric design, drainage design, all sorts of designs, BOQ preparation, land acquisitions, environmental and social reports, then clearances from the departments, assist client during pre-construction activities, in addition to other works like road signs marking design and all. So now I will present this one in 2 parts. One for the design projects, that is project preparation stage for the government clients, that is NHI, NHIDCL, MOT, and the other one where consultants role with the contractors. So during all my works, I have observed and faced few issues, which concerns we can say and perspectives we can say I am sharing here for the forum. That is the formulation. First point, formulation of TOR. It is the same document for every project, which includes everything irrespective of the nature of the project and requirement of the project. I have some examples of that at the latter presentations. I will present that also. Second is very important in my view is that the consultant submits inception report as a requirement of deliverables. Generally, there is no further study on the inception report. It is properly done as per TOR. Only the clauses are checked, and it is project specific or not. It is not studied in detail. Third is the delay in decision of various options on alignments, bypasses, as well as realignment stretches. So this is one of the major issues when we start executing the contract, that there will be, that should be highlighted in the inception report, that these are the locations where bypasses will be there. These are the locations where realignments can be there, and a prompt decision is required. But this in the feasibility stage also, these decisions are prolonged. There are reasons for that. That is separate, but these delays are delaying the deliverables. Then too much bookish about deployment of the named personnel rather than verifying quality of those personnel during proposal evaluation stage itself. There is a proposal evaluation, we engage persons, but consultants, this during the proposal preparations, this consultant submits CV. There are a lot of loopholes in the RFP. All those are taken care and then the CV submitted. What happened? Finally, the project suffers. The person in a project where tunnel design engineering will be there, that tunnel engineer's input will be for 1 month or 2 months only. And that CV, their requirement, as per requirement, he can do structures, he can do tunnels, he can do elevated structures, all of qualification requirements are there. So the properly CV who can do the work is not there. Proposal evaluation is generally leads to list costs nowadays, because if it is QCBC, but many projects are coming as 70-30, 70 technical, 30 financial. 80-20 projects are better, but 70-30 projects is very difficult to get project based on quality only. Range of fees, we all know now, it is varies from 1 lakh per kilometer to 2 to 3 kilometer for two laning widening projects. But is it possible to give same output for both the rates? So it is not possible. So this evaluation methodology also, I feel little bit needs to be reviewed. Then one important point, which if we take at the proposal stage, it will remove many problems during the execution. Like we generally site appreciation marks are not much, 2 marks or 3 marks are there, generally site appreciation. It should be around 25% marks to be allotted in the appreciation. It should be linked with the objective of the work, so that consultant get motivated for visiting the site at proposal stage only. If I know there are projects that greenfield alignments, consultants quote their which is not matching with the ground condition, and during execution there are a lot of letter writing and everything, notices, everything will be served, but the actual project gets suffered. Even though deliverables are submitted in time, at many instances by giving the reason of no fund, consultants are not paid timely. What happens? This leads to delay in disbursement of payment to their own staff, vendor, output suffers finally. This is one of the major drawback in overall system. I like to mention that everybody, all who are in the policy making and all who are dealing with this part, need to look into this payment issue part. Availability of many data are uncertain due to security reasons. Like survey of institution maps cannot be procured by consultant very quickly when it is at border areas. But these survey of India maps are very important to evaluate drainage, to evaluate initial studies. And situation of secondary data availability also at client office is very uncertain. This leads to consumption of huge time and energy to gather those from various stakeholders. One major gray area is land acquisition data and preparation of land acquisition maps, as well as clearances. As private entity, consultants are given limited access to land offices that we are day-to-day facing in our detail engineering projects. Also, system functions on various ifs and buts and on incidentals, which is very difficult to carry on by the consultants. And that in that case, project happens, project suffers. Our RFPs are also not very clear at what stage, what to submit on land acquisition activities. This also, I will put one example from one project example in later, that will be clear. Time schedule for preparation of DPR is generally less compared to deliverables and output requirements. That leads to complication and punishment to the consultants. But finally, project suffers. At many instances, consultants are regularly threatened for debarment, blacklisting, penalty. So that in that case, what happens? Consultants, one role is to prepare their supporting documents for delay, and that leads to lot of time consumption, lot of discussion on that field. And what happens? The deliverable gets delays. Many a time, scope is not clear to the client itself. For EPC design projects, few clients want detailed design of bridges with good for construction drawing, and few ask for good for tender drawings, because these two terms are mentioned in the RFP at two places. So this is also leading to once starting with the construction drawing preparation, then somebody wants tender drawing. So this is also one point where this delay starts building. Now I will show few examples of DPR from the DPRs where I will explain that what is the problems we are facing day to day. See, this is the example from a TUR where DPR preparation for greenfield connectivity DPR. That means there are 2 points given and it has to be go through the greenfield. And if we go by existing road, it is 230 kilometer. If we go by state roads, it will be reduced to 38 kilometer. It is in northeast, completely hilly area. See, at the 3.1 scope of services, it is mentioned as far as possible, widening improvement works of 2 laning with paved shoulder shall be within the existing right of way, avoiding land acquisition except for locations having inadequate width. Another para it is saying, however, bypass proposal should also be considered, where in urban areas, improvement of 2-lane existing road is not possible. So this needs to be reviewed, means this type of lines are not required. Para 4.1 in primary text, it is saying it includes inventory and condition survey of road, bridge, cross drainage structures. But as this connectivity between 2 points all along greenfield, these activities not at all involved. These things consultants highlight in the inception report generally, but finally a concurrence should be there, a revision of the conditions, TUR, revision of the TURs, final TUR should be there at the inception stage. That is not happening. Similarly, in 4.9 traffic surveys, the scope of services is similarly same as the widening project scope. So if it is a greenfield project, more stress should be given on the network study, more scope should be given on the origin destination surveys and all, but it is only regular widening scheme survey. Whereas alignment option scope is not elaborated in terms of reference, which should be the major structure. It is there. It is just mentioned as a part of general task that alignment option study needs to be done. But when we are going to create a greenfield alignment, then alignment option study should have been in detail, so that these are the parameters they should consider. These are the stakeholders meeting should be considered. All those things are separately not mentioned in the TUR. So a few more points I will highlight here, that at 4.10, when traffic demand estimates are there, in TUR it is mentioned, quote unquote, that it is envisaged that 2x4 lane of the project road sections covered under this TUR would be completed and open to the traffic in 3 years. Whereas the traffic subject assignment is the development of greenfield into highway connectivity. So where it is 2x4 laning, widening laning project is involved, there is problem. Though it is greenfield development project, my all examples which are giving for our terms of reference of a greenfield project. This is, it is greenfield development project. PBD surveys as well as pavement roughness surveys need to be performed as per project scope. TUS says geotechnical investigation to be done by MOTH empanel agency by digging boreholes. But as per actual project scenario, it is not possible. We know, we went to the site and we know it is not possible for that taking this big rigs and machinery to the site. As accessibility heavy equipment is not possible, but TUR does not mention any alternative methods like geophysical survey, etc. It is just mentioning MOTH empanel agency for digging boreholes. In that case, what is happening? Consultants are writing to the authority that please allow us to give geophysical investigation team for alternative method, then supporting documents. This takes a lot of time to finalize this operation. So now I will mention few confusions which we generally face during the land acquisition period. At feasibility stage, it is mentioned that land acquisition plan is a deliverable as per TUR. But unless alignment is approved after analysis of details of FSR, how come land LAP can be prepared? LAP can be done after FSR study, but not along with the deliverables of FSR. Many a time, feasibility payments are withheld due to not submission of land acquisition plan. So at FSR stage, kilometer-wise LAP as well as ownership details are required to be submitted as per TUR. How come ownership details can be submitted unless alignment is finalized, stakeholder meetings are done, but we have to submit feasibility in 2 months to 4 months time in general projects, not more than that. It is not possible as per our practice and as per our the offices, land acquisition offices works. it is not possible to submit in that time. So we need to introspect our all these subjects and go ahead in that. At feasibility stage, land acquisition report to be submitted. It is mentioned, I will quote unquote, the land acquisition report shall cover all submissions as required for issuance of notification under section 3 small a, 3 capital A, 3D, 3 capital G, along with all details as necessary for the forest, environment, wildlife clearances. You can very well understand at feasibility stage, if we can complete all those things, then feasibility itself will go for long time. So we need to bifurcate these things. Land acquisition, the RFP should be devised in such a way these activities will go parallelly, and feasibility study payment should be excluded from that. In many projects, clients do not accommodate payment for that. Few also accommodate. I will not tell that it is not accommodated, but part payment, maybe 50%, 60% payment is recovered for the feasibility stage. So again, something on this, I will elaborate that under head of topographical survey, fixing of boundary pillars have been mentioned in TUR. But in all practical scenario, it is not possible to fix boundary pillars before LAP is finalized with LA department and compensation packages are finalized. If at the topographical survey stage, even alignment is final, we are going to fix boundary pillars. There are many instances projects are getting stopped or delayed as if local people think that boundary pillar fixing means land acquisition has been done. So we can shift it to the end stage. It can be linked with the last 10% payment which is held during the construction stage. So during project preparation stage, consultant can go and arrange for the boundary pillar fixing once compensation package is finalized. Another point, that 4.12.6, where the design of bridges. Here working drawings are mentioned at deliverables, but at other para 4.1, preparation of good for tender drawings are mentioned. So it is a confusion. In many projects, consultant think to go for the good for tender drawings, but finally it has to be going for working drawing. So efforts for these two are huge. It needs time. So this submission is that to the forum, discuss further, and we can discuss in later stage also. Generalized TOR or scope of services need to be amended as per project requirement. It needs efforts before the award of the project. Lot of effort from the authority that what is required for that project particularly, it is required to be done that. So summary, whatever I have discussed now, that causes or my concerns here as a consultant: insufficient timeline for preparation of feasibility DPR, delay in payment, upsets cash flow, land acquisition activities, decision making regarding alignment and other improvement proposals, unclear RFP and TOR terms of reference, award of project to generally list cost agency, incompetent key staff, not addressing consultants' genuine problems. Now I will shift my focus to contractors design director. So nowadays in EPC projects, all EPC project has got a design director, and their consultants are engaged to do the design. There are also issues which are concerns of consultant as well as overall project concern. So actually project scope is not clear from the very first day. There are many projects, project scope is not clear from the very first day. After finalizing design quotation and getting work order, surprises come in the form of change of alignment due to land acquisition difficulty, restricted land, introduction to elevated structure to satisfy local needs or actual requirement due to time gap between DPR and award work. This is a very important aspect in the detailed design, and consultant keep on discussing with contractors for revision codes or all those things. Time lapse happens. The delay, these delays surveys and disrupt all further planning works. Fund flow to the consultants are very poor, and at the list priority, work related to design suffers. It is that only payment. If we see any design consultants payment schedule, it is bifurcated in 12 to 15 parts, and in a not very suitable for the upfront works like survey, investigation. These are all upfront works to be done, but payments are not front loading. It is mostly back loading. At few cases, work schedules or work planning are not clear regarding priority stretches. so that
Hello.
consultant can carry out works accordingly. This is a execution issue, so it is also affects the finally designed works. Many
Mr.
times it is
Kalyan,
observed that
Hello.
even
Host.
after start of execution, handing over of lands
Hello.
are pending due to delay and disputed land acquisition, forest
I
clearances,
think
environmental
it's not able to
clearances.
hear us.
This is one of the major
Hello.
bottleneck in progress of design as well as execution. Another important point that delay in giving approval of change of scope. It is issue between contractor and authority that there are change of scopes, and finalization of change of scope gets lot of time, and this dispute finally leads to delay in design, and completion of the overall project gets hampered. So with this small note, I will thank you everybody for listening my these concerns, and we can discuss later further on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Kollan. Thank you for a very, very elaborate presentation, and we could see how passionately you were involved in the whole process, and you feel all the pains very frequently, and you wanted a forum to express your views. We have, I think everybody has noted your concerns, primarily the low pricings, which have to be, prices which have to be quoted by the consultant to get the job, because of although QCBS system is followed, but with 70/30, it still ends up with a list cost. You talked about consultants' lack of site appreciation and why more weightage should be given to that aspect of the proposal. Land acquisition, as we know, preparation distract, like earlier preparations for very long, we thought distracts the engineering focus. I believe that it should be left to a specialized agency taken out completely from the engineering aspect, the LA part. QRQ is not compatible with the project requirement. This is quite common, has to be sorted out. And all this is there because if we have an absence of, proper feasibility study, and, earlier we used to have a project management or coordinating consultant in previous project who used to look into all these aspects on behalf of the client and bring about a common thread, put everything through kind of a uniformity on all the documents, but that is lacking there. That is one of the issues that we have flagged, and unclear TOR. We'll come to all this aspects during the panel discussion. Thank you, Kollan. Now I would invite Mr. Amitabh Datta, who was the past chairman of the Eastern Zone of CAI and former vice president of Stoop Consulting. He will speak on the PMC, the supervision angle of the consultants' services, which is the direct correlation and the interaction with the client as well as the contractor. So, Mr. Datta, you can now start your presentation.
Sir, I'll share the presentation. I am back.
Okay. Good evening. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah. Before you start, Mr. Datta, my request to all the participants and the attendees that please post your questions in the Q&A box, not in the chat box, please. And we'll take up the questions at the end, at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Good evening, all. We have heard a lot about the highway projects, their formulation, rather funding. Now, I will straightway come into the business of my part, which is basically issues consultants faces or encounter during project implementation. Next slide. This is just my profile. Actually, I was the past chairman of CI Northeast, But actually I have served with, still serving with Stoop Consultants. It is my 38th year, 38. And I retired, last year I retired as a vice president and now continuing as an advisor to the board for international projects. Next. Yeah, I will come very briefly about the issues we face, consultant face. Actually, it is not only the consultant. In my presentation, it also gets reflected about the suffering of the contractors, because I will give a little bit of background. We all talk about PMC, we all talk about supervision, but in the beginning of that industry, say in 94, 95, when it started, it used to be always supervision consultants who used to supervise the project, and administrative part used to mostly with the client. But after that, the change was like authorities engineer. So when we call about the authorities engineer, the consultants team is now rather clubbed with two responsibilities. One is the supervision and quality control, and then also the administrative part of the project implementation. So the very first issues, I have a lot of experience of highway project, both DPR and supervision, and as an authority engineer too. There is a big difference. Either engineer's consultant or authority engineer, the service is the same. So in many projects we find that consultant's appointment comes little later than the contractor's deployment. Immediately the issue comes about that ground level, the level of fixing, that situation of the work, documentation, and that creates a lot of difficulty with the consultant. And in delaying deployment of the consultants, a major issue comes immediately is the team members. Sometimes it happens that almost a year plus, the time has passed, it is not possible to keep that key personnel hold on. So their question comes about the replacement, that takes time, that creates problem with the client as well the consultant, and that ultimately hampers the project work. Next. This actually, next slide please. Yeah. Actually, there is another issue which is very major. Is a question I have raised in many forums, but I'm not confident enough that whether some thought has been given on this or not. To be very frank, I have not seen any projects which has been comfortably completed within the scheduled time of say 30 or 36 months plus 12 months or say 18 months DLP. So my basic question is, when we prepare a DPR, then ultimately get into that time construction period or deployment schedule of the contractor's work, I think some new thought has to be given, something has to be thought about the timing, because in most of the cases, the contractor fails from the beginning, then it fails in achieving a milestone, and the milestone failing milestone is actually directly affecting the payment to the contractor, and then the payment to the contractors leads to penalties, and it fails the cash flow. But the question is how consultant suffers. All this lead, next slide please. All this ultimately leads to preparation of extension of time. As I told, the consultant is now responsible for as an authority's representative. So the issue comes about that EOT preparation, then the dispute between the contractor and the consultant, and it becomes difficult to convince the client about that real EOT, the total actual time. Then in many cases it happens, the project awarded say about 2 years back, I had two projects. Both are national highway through local NH division, MORTH project. In both the cases, we had a same problem. The award was almost in the month of June and July. And immediately there is a problem with the rain accessibility, and the rain creates problem with that basic preliminary work like artwork, and that creates rather time constant in the beginning. And then the question comes about how we work out about the loss of working days. I always fight, it is very difficult for a working out on a loss of days during rainy season, because it has a long-term effect in a different way. Like when it, say, when there is a rain, there are access to that site is almost gone. And particularly in case of ROB and RUB, this is always difficult because it cannot be reached through any access. So ultimately the contractor suffers. And that leads to, again, the dispute with EOT, and that, ultimately the dispute comes between the contractor and the consultant and the authority itself. So that creates a problem, and ultimately contractor fails to get payment, and in the process the project suffers. Next slide. And again, delay of different type of documents, a delay in approval of replacement CVs, delay in EOT approval for the contractors. And it is very interesting that during extension of time approval, the contractors, the process goes on, because that lot of times it is revision and resubmission, rework. It goes on from table to table. In the process, the actual construction period gets over. Consultants' working duration lands up in a DLP position, where the DLP actually could not start, but consultant is not given extension of time, because until and unless extension of time for the contractors are approved and granted, consultants EOT cannot be granted, because it is a link that the consultants EOT will be granted up to that time extended for the contractor. So in the process, what happens? In the process, whatever the estimated cost which was there in the contract, or in the contract document, during that construction period, that gets exhausted and needs an additional fund, even though the contract have a figure, but the allocation which has been made in the contract during the DLP period cannot be offset during the construction. So it needs an additional approval that even takes, I have got an experience of working for a project in Odisha where this process took about 1.5 years. So we had to keep on working on the project without any payment for more than a year. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is what I mentioned. The payment to the consultant during the original construction period occurs more or less within the specified time frame. But after elapse of the original construction period, there is enormous delay in payment to the consultant due to that, what I explained. Next. Yeah. That on completion of that EOT, the variation statement submitted by the consultants for additional financial implication for the extended period also need to be approved by the authority. And again, in this particular case, the authority is, there are two. If it is a national highway under MORTH with the National Highway State Division, the issue comes between the state national highway division and that Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, their RO office. That agreement between these two, this takes a huge long time for approval. Yeah, next. Yeah, another issue we are recently, rather I will not say recently, about a year and a half back, that contractors still going on in the process. In two projects, contractor had to be terminated and a new contractor had to be appointed, because that land was given to the contractor who whose, of course, the quotation was also low. They got the job, and Northeast, you know that the packages are not very big, and the land was given in piecemeal, both in right-hand side and the left-hand side. And ultimately, maybe in totality, if you make it a cumulative, it might be about 70–72%, but it was not actually workable in that way, because particularly during the rainy season, the work could not be taken up in a continuous stretch in either left hand or right hand, due to that existing, because it was an existing 2-lane being 4-lane, so it's not a greenfield project. So that lot of delay, lot of problem with the maintenance of the existing road, and actually such issues ultimately landed up with delay, non-payment, penalty, and then court case, and ultimately termination. Yeah, next. Yeah, this particular issue I'm talking about is water supply related project, or you can say that ADB or World Bank or JICA who are funding. Mostly in this particular project, we are presently, I was also coordinating 3 projects, of which all the 3 are under ADB. But here we find very difficulties in managing the PMU and PIUs and keep them together, because PMU under PIU, PIU under PMU sometimes doesn't function well. And for a particularly ADB, World Bank and JICA project, officers, the project officers who are supposed to run the project or administer the system, they are trained. But unfortunately, they keep on changing. They get transferred because they get promotion. Somebody comes in, and in the process, somebody comes in who takes over, was not trained under that same system of ADB or World Bank. I have recently an experience of a ADB project under Public Health Engineering Department, Government of West Bengal, where the project is something about 2 years old, and we have the 7th project director in the project. And every time it comes as a problem for us, because we are going to make that person aware about how was the system working, how was the design, because in this particular type of projects, design of the water supply pipelines or water supply distribution system, or even that STP comes from the contractors, and consultant is supposed to review design and accord approval. And in the process, there are some rules which are to be followed as per the ADB guidelines. But when the change in officials happens, they sometimes goes back to their system of PHED and etc. That creates a confusion between contractor, consultants, and ultimately landing up in a delay in the project. Next slide, please. So with this, I think we need to have a monitoring team with members from all the stakeholders like clients, consultants, and contractors. This is, in few forum we have raised this issue. We have discussed. Many of us consider that this is necessary, but I just don't know. I am putting this in this August forum, that we need to give a good thought about forming a project specific monitoring team, so that this gives a relief to the justice and relief to the contractor, justice and relief to the consultants, because consultants, though working as a extended hand of the client, as an authorities engineer, but the question comes about the trust and dependency on the consultant. So I think this is a major issue which can certainly solve some of the problems in future. So we need to give a thought on this. And the next slide, please. And major question, I think it also came up. Mr. Gulab Chand raised also this issue about the selection of criteria of contractors as well consultant. And I think in the beginning, some discussion was made by Somiran about that minister's comments on this. But I still feel that this is an issue which, I got involved in the highway projects in our country and think since 1994, when NHI was not formed. It used to be that MORTS project. There are 3 World Bank project. In all the 3, my organization was the supervision consult. That time it was purely a supervision consultant, and we had 3 international associates, and I was the coordinator there. And I had experience from that time onward, selection of criteria for contractors and consultants in those beginning of our the highway engineering in India. And today there are a lot of changes has taken place. I think we need to have a solution to be thought of, which is the best solution. A lot of discussion in lot of seminars, this has taken place, lot of issues, lot of checks and balances being implemented by an MORTH or NHAI or the government. But ultimately, we also need to find out a solution. And my question is, what best solution can be thought of? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
I think
thank you.
if there is anything,
Yeah, please be there, Mr. Datta. We have the panelists to discuss, but before that, I will just summarize what Mr. Datta, he also, highlighted the issues which Kullan had started about unrealistic timeline and payment issues plaguing the consultants. But ultimately, he made out a case for delinking consultants' contract with that of the contractors. These are 2 different entities and they work in different ways, although for the same project. So that has to be looked into. The client has to take cognizance of this problem. And Mr. Datta made an interesting suggestion about forming a monitoring team for project or a cluster of projects constituted by members from all the stakeholders, contractors, consultants, and the clients. We can understand the client is overstretched. They have limited manpower, and we are thinking of trillions and trillions rupees of investment in future. I can understand the dilemma and the problem of the client, a client like NHI or as we know in the other sector, Jal Jeevan Mission, humongous task to be undertaken by the client with limited manpower. So we have to outsource the work to consultants and of course the contractors. And there has to be a monitoring, and this is an interesting thought. We can discuss this later or as we go along in the panel discussion. Now we come to the panel discussion. We have with us Mr. D.P. Mathuria, who is the Executive Director Technical from the National Mission for Clean Ganga, and I would request him to present his views from a completely different perspective of water and waterways and water resources sector, because we have been talking about the highways and the other bridges and road sector so far. So, Mr. Mathuria, can you please present your views on this aspect of the infrastructure development which is coming in the next 5 years, which will definitely include your sector also. Mr. Mathuria, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sen, and good evening to all the speakers for the day on a very important webinar, in fact, on the challenges in infrastructure engineering projects. Delivery with a particular focus on pandemic situation. I happen to represent a different sector altogether. We have been hearing a lot during this webinar on transportation sector, which is a very capital intensive sector and which have seen a lot of capital inflow in terms of development of infrastructure. But of late, water, in fact, which is an elixir for life, has resonated, has found resonance in terms of the government priority both towards development of infrastructure assets and also in terms of looking at our river systems and water bodies, and to see that they remain overall rejuvenated and conserved for the benefit of environment and civilization alike. And with this perspective, the government of India in 2014, they came up with the program of Namami Gange, which is an integrated river Ganga conservation mission. And accordingly, in terms of the political commitment which was enlisted, a scheme was grounded with an outlay, an impressive outlay, in fact, for the first time in the country, and I think in this part of the world also, in this Southeast Asian part of the continent also, an outlay, a budgetary outlay, which was non-relapsable of 20,000 crore was earmarked for creation of not only sewerage infrastructure assets, which have been lacking in terms of priority of our, whether it is a union government or state government or our urban local bodies, number one, and also looking holistically on the entire issue of water and conservation of environment. As one who is representing this sector, under this program, since its its announcement to date, we have through a very objective and conscious program, we have embarked upon about 330 different kind of projects. In fact, they are sewerage infrastructure projects. There are projects to restore continuity of the flows in the river. There are projects for high resolution mapping of river Ganga basin for restoring the baseline status of the rivers and the floodplains. There are projects for afforestation, restoration of biodiversity alike, and about half of these projects have been completed. Now, coming strictly to the sewerage infrastructure projects, which are again very capital intensive projects. There are two components. In fact, there are two aspects of it. One is creation of an asset. There have been earlier programs in form of I'm quite sure everyone knows about it. There have been earlier programs in form of Ganga Action Plan, Yamuna Action Plan, Gomti Action Plan, etc. But this has been a comprehensive mission wherein about 23,000 crores of sewerage infrastructure projects have been sanctioned by the government of India. And the beauty of these projects are that they not only focus on creation of an asset and bringing those assets in the mainstream of thought process and implementation society alike, but they also look at operation and maintenance of these projects under 100%, near 100% funding by government of India for a very impressive period of 15 years. And some paradigm changes were thought by the government, and they were implemented too. First time in the country, HAM model, hybrid annuity model, or a PPP kind of a model was implemented for the bigger settlements, bigger geographical entities, bigger towns, wherein a governance model was practiced, bringing in all the greenfield development with the brownfield projects also, so that one window solution through a concessionaire is attempted so far as treatment of the sewage, municipal sewage and waste happens in per se for the town itself, bigger municipality or the conglomerate of the town. And accordingly, about 13 such kind of projects are in the pipeline, which is again a subset of the overall 23,000 crore of the projects. These projects have been challenging, very challenging, largely because we are working in a probabilistic domain. The kind of sewage that we'll get, kind of water quality we'll get, these are high risk insecurity areas into which the concessionaires are asked to play and to give their bids. And accordingly, there is and since the operating contours are long-term duration, there are 15 years in time during which these concessionaires not only has to see that these plants remain operational, but there are also baseline treated water quality parameters they have to meet to be eligible for not only operational maintenance payment, but also annuitized capital investment that they have incurred under the concession agreement. Besides, we have smaller number of the projects which are DBOT kind of the projects, which are equally challenging. Now, the challenge not only lies in the profile of water quality, which is flowing in the drains, in the sewers, but also about the quantity of the flows. We certainly, the kind of urbanization that India is seeing over last decade or so is very indeterminate, in a sense that we certainly are not able to make a proper assessment as to the quantity of sewage, and then we are asking the concessioner to provide us comprehensive solution, an optimal solution, which will cater to the needs for the years, for the year like 2035 or 2050. So that is a domain, and that is uncertainty under which the entire program is being, successfully managed. There have been a lot of and I must, before this August audience, August gathering, I must emphasize that out of these about 23,000 crores of 160 sewerage projects that we are implementing, about 60 of them have been completed. They are running successfully. Now, COVID has been a very challenging time. As I was saying, not only building these assets are equally important. These are sewerage network projects or interception and diversion of the drain projects. They involve not only land acquisition, but also all sort of clearances in terms of shifting the utilities, working in very congested lanes of the cities, downtown areas of the cities, working with the state players, working with our municipalities who have lack of knowledge when it comes to, or lack of resident understanding when it comes to these kind of projects, and then equally through our contractual arrangements, as it has been pointed out during the one by Mr. Gulab Chand, that risk allocation and risk sharing, these are some of the key concerns that we have built in our concessionaire agreements through number of marketing conferences that we held with not only the bankers but with also the prospective concessionaires. And this PPP model we have been able to ground quite successfully. During the pandemic, it has been consistent effort, in fact aligned to the government of India, some of the steps to ease the cash outflow to our vendors. Number of welfare or proactive steps were taken to ease the cash outflow situation to the vendors. Most of our projects, I won't say that they were not affected. In fact, they were affected. The progress of the projects were affected, but through our own digital innovations in forms of taking meetings, in form of virtually monitoring the projects, or even clearing the design drawings and those kind of non-site specific activities, the projects could progress well. The impact has been minimal. In fact, I must say, and we have been able to ground and complete many of the projects during those times, and few of very important projects were inaugurated by Honorable Prime Minister himself in Uttarakhand. And another important issue which I must reflect upon this August gathering is that operation and maintenance of these projects happen to be an important task, and all the projects, all the sewerage infrastructure projects existing, we made it a point that they continue to operate in the times of pandemic, consistent to the sanitation and sanitation concerns of the day. The National Mission for Clean Ganga, while implementing Namami Gange program, has been quite proactively conscious of many of the concerns that have been raised by earlier speakers in terms of contract management. We do have a system of a consultant. We have an in-house project management consultant who assists us in appraisal, in-house appraisal of various kind of schemes. We have a panel of IITs and NITs who in fact provide us third-party outlook and built-in inputs for these kind of projects, including supervision. Then we have project engineers who are eyes and ears, and they oversee the implementation of those projects. Many of the issues that have been raised by previous speakers were quite private to it. They have been part and parcel of a program. We have been trying to find solution to those problems. But one thing that has in fact caught our imagination also, and somebody also told that Mr. Nitin Gadkari, who happened to be our minister sometime back, about 2 years back, for quite some time, that the quality of the DPR or feasibility level studies that are being done by the consultants or the reports that are being generated is quite wanting. There are big gaps, which in fact, when you translate those DPRs into projects, when you translate those abstract ideas into projects, you really find big problems, big gaps during the implementation. And that is one of the major concerns which have been impediment in successful grounding the project. So as somebody told, a very bankable kind of a DPR, which is based on ground, on-site ground verification of entire carbon settings, including, using best of the techniques like GIS, etc., is of paramount importance before these projects are taken up. In fact, there are quite up to number of examples, particularly in few states, Ganga Basin states, where in spite of we having sanctioned those projects and committing 100% payment towards the state government for implementation of those projects couldn't take off because later when during pre-bid conferences or those kind of interactions, it occurred very clearly that DPR has been grossly inadequate and off the way. So it has, and those projects have led to a wastage of about 2 years. And these were some of the very stark observations of Public Account Committee, which is one of the highest fora to apprise the performance of these kind of national programs. So because Consulting Engineers Association comes to represent, and in fact it is a broad-based kind of fora wherein we do have project engineers, consultants, as well as people who are representing the construction industry. Bankability of the DPR is of paramount importance, and the role of project engineers for implementation of the project and monitoring of the construction remains a key concern. These are my some reflections, and one in fact, in many of our projects are externally aided projects, World Bank or JICA assisted projects, and we have an environmental social assessment framework built in within the contract, which tries to address the concerns of the workers. And obviously, this COVID situation was quite unexpected. It was a pandemic which nobody thought would be impacting the entire scenario globally in such a way. So we have in fact gone ahead with our World Bank assistance program as a phase 2 of Ganga World Bank program, wherein we have specifically earmarked some impressive, handsome, outlay for provisioning of and provisioning as well as mitigating and adapting to such kind of force majeure kind of conditions, so that our contracts and contracted systems remains indemnified of the impacts due to such kind of severe situations. So I'll stop at this point. These were some of my reflections dwelling upon our experience in grounding Namami Gange program during the last 5 or 6 years, and trying to see. In fact, I came across many valuable suggestions from the speakers. Will give us opportunity to relook at our contracts also, so that we are also able to timely, ground the projects and try to achieve the objectives. Thank you, and I'll be available for any questions henceforth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madhuria. That was very interesting in the sense that it threw a light on a different aspect of the infrastructure development and your concerns. Of course, there are common issues with the rest of the fraternity and the industry. We try to address all those things. subsequently, now we have Mr. R.P. Indoria. We all know the former DGRD, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways with us. So, Mr. Indoria, can you say a few words about your views on this issue, particularly on the contracts part, which you are very experienced in? Mr. Indoria.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. San, and a very good evening to all. Very eminent and learned speakers have spoken before me, so I don't think I have much to add. But sticking to the theme, the way forward, I think the basic thing for any project implementation is the contract agreement, which is responsible for smooth implementation of the project in an efficient manner and minus the disputes. I have seen in my times a proliferation of contract documents. Now, a contract document is used by the client's representatives, by the executing agency, and the consultant. And even before they can get used to it, you change it. Creates more set of complications. And the pandemic has thrown open some more new issues. It's time we all put our head together and frame documents. Of course, there has been a lot of development in the contract document part, from the master and slave relation to the current contract documents, which are more equitable. But still there is need for improvement. And in consultation with all the stakeholders, the contract documents to be revised and revised for good. No, should not be changed every year or 2 years. The next point is the successful implementation in time with quality depends on another important aspect, and that is the selection of the agency, be it the consultant or the contractor. Now, the selection process or the selection criteria has to be such that we are able to keep out, if not absolutely eliminate, the non-serious players. And it's a known fact that there are non-serious players in the construction field, in consultancy field, everywhere. And this L1 syndrome is no good. We have to come out like Mr. Amitabh Datta flagged. We have to think of a best method for selection of agency, because if the selection is not proper, be assured the project will have problems. I will try to restrict myself because a lot of time is. Other important issue which comes to my mind and which the government has already taken care of. The government has been very proactive. There have been issues delaying the project, like the clearances from various other agencies involved, the land acquisition authorities, the forest, the environment, all these things. There is a portal called Pragati, where the progress projects are being monitored live. Now, what this has done? This has stopped the interagency buck passing because it's live. So the one agency poses a question, another agency has to answer. Nobody can bluff anybody. This is a very positive change, and this will continue. Another important issue is funding of the projects. When we started the public-private partnership projects way back in late 90s and early 2000, the lending for these projects was considered non-recourse financing. And for some reason, the RBI has categorized project finances as unsecured loans. We tried to argue a lot with the RBI that these loans are not unsecured because there is security. Substitution agreements. No, and the receivable on the project are a guarantee. So how can it be unsecured? And when it is unsecured, the commercial lenders, the banks and financial institutions have a very limited kitty. And from that kitty, it was not really possible to finance all the projects. And because the kitty was limited, the interest rates went very high. we tried to argue with the government that let us have access to pension funds, insurance funds, because that will also solve the problem. The commercial lenders really do not have long-term debt instruments available with them. Whereas the pension funds, the bonds, the insurance funds, they will provide easy liquidity, abundance of cash available to be funded for these projects for non-recourse financing. Anyhow, I hope the industry bodies like NHBF, CEI, FICCI, IIC will put their weight behind and try to persuade the powers that be that these changes are really required for efficient implementation of infrastructure projects. I'm not restricting to highways only, all across the sector of infrastructure projects. The other point I would like to discuss is avoidance of disputes. Because as Mr. Gulabchand mentioned, a lot of working capital of the construction industry is stuck in disputes. And this can be avoided if we have a comprehensive contract document which will take care of not only the situations after the pandemic, but even before pandemic, like approvals of change of scope, approval of EOT, those kind of issues, and minimize the disputes. That will ensure a speedy and smooth implementation of the projects. And I have always advocated that the authority engineer should be selected before the selection of a contractor. That also creates problem in smooth implementation of the projects. And I think I don't have much to add as of now.
You will have to add when we ask you questions, Mr. Ingoria. Thank you. And of course, we keep on.
I'm trying to be sensitive to the time limit.
we keep on converging to the point that adoption of documents like FIDIC is the answer to whatever. FIDIC is a time tested, but the problem with FIDIC is, which I have experienced in my career, that FIDIC has a chapter called conditions of particular application or special conditions, whatever you call it. The intent and a purpose of that provision is to customize the document according to your national or local conditions. But what has happened, while writing the conditions of particular application and special conditions, many a times we have killed the spirit of the FIDIC document. That also should not happen. Okay. So nothing in excess is good. So we have to be very, conscious of keeping the spirit of the general conditions, and the particular conditions, COPA as we call it, should address the very, very important local and the conditions and the project conditions. Thank you. Now, Mr. Sushanto Kumar Basu, who is representing the Builders Association in this forum, and he is the past national president with vast experience. Mr. Basu will be able to, highlight certain points about the contractors. He has been talking to me about the cash flow problem and locked inventory, etc. Mr. Basu, please. In 5 minutes, sir. Basu, please. Can't hear you. You are on mute, sir. Mr. Basu, you are on mute.
Also on mute.
That's okay now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shen, and good evening to all. The topic for today is challenges in engineering project delivery with focus on pandemic situation, way forward. I restrict myself to the boundary laid down by this topic and the 5-minute time limit that the organizer has set for each of the panelists. You see, the main challenge to construction industry today is to heal the wounds that the industry has suffered due to this pandemic, and next to augment itself to the level where we can take up the challenge of implementing projects for a 5 trillion US dollar economy in 5 years' time. Before we go further, we need to keep in mind certain facts about construction industry in India. Number one, the market size of the construction industry is around 14 lakhs crore INR. Fact two, the construction industry is the second largest contributor to the GDP, and the percentage share is 9%. Number three, the volume of workforce the industry engages is to the tune of 70 million, which again pushes the industry to the second position in the country after agriculture. Now, from these parameters, anyone can understand how important the industry is to the society as well as to the country. But unfortunately, the society and the country do not give due importance to this industry what it deserves. This pandemic has brought immense misery to the industry by way of loss of revenue, by way of a total upset of cash flow, disturbance in the supply chain, disturbance in the labor supply, and whatnot. The government has taken care to some extent in the cash flow problem by allowing the industry as well as other industries to have additional loan facilities, of course, at a hefty interest rate. This has to some extent mitigated the cash flow problem, but it has increased the cost of the project. Now, the client, the owner of the projects, should take the responsibility of the losses that the industry has faced because of this pandemic. As the principle of GST goes, the ultimate person who pays the GST is the owner or the end user. Similarly, in a project where the beneficiary or the end user is the client, he should bear the responsibility of the losses that have been caused by acts of God or by force majeure. The owner cannot shrug off by saying that it is force majeure for you, it is force majeure for us. This cannot be the principle. The cost of construction has to be borne by the owner. Now, when we look at tomorrow, we see the calling of a 5 trillion US dollar economy, which our Prime Minister is dreaming of and which is definitely very much possible. But to attain this level of economy, we need to invest hugely in the construction sector, and the construction industry of India should be capable of handling this. And for that, the construction industry is required to be made robust so that it can handle that. And weak economy cannot deliver, and weak industry also cannot deliver. So I'll again go back to the first sentence that I said, that the challenge is to heal the wounds that has been suffered by the industry due to this pandemic, and the owners of the project must take the financial losses that the industry have suffered. There are definitely other challenges like skilled workforces, machinery, modern machineries, and those are being taken care of by the industry and the society and the government. But the first and foremost point is the government must wake up and look into the financial losses the industry has suffered, because with a crippled industry, you cannot expect and you will not get the desired services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. Finally, our own Mr. Amitabh Ghoshal, the immediate past president of CEI and a very, very renowned bridge engineer. Everybody, he's the go-to person even at this age. He has been in the consultant industry for many, many years. Mr. Ghoshal, for your views on the issues which are under discussion and your insights into it, please.
Hello. Can I?
Yes.
Mr. Shen, can I start? Well, friends, we are towards the end of this very interesting session, which has very significantly arranged jointly by the representative of the construction industry, the consultancy industry, and with active support from the owners. That reflects the mood. You see, the theme is challenges in project delivery with focus on pandemic situation. Now, pandemic is not just the COVID-19 situation. Along with this COVID-19 situation, humanity has been exposed to unexpected natural calamities in the form of flood, drought, earthquake, and avalanches, landslides, all of which are in an unprecedented scale. So what today globally the construction industry along with the occupants of the earth are facing are unknown situations. So we have to prepare for the unknown situation. And my earlier speakers, Mr. Pandey has highlighted on the scale of development which had been unleashed by NHAI and subsequently other authorities. Mr. Ajib Golabchand has excellently presented the main sources of problem, the lack of resources, particularly financial resources, and how one has got to handle that. He has given solutions as well. But today, and of course, my other speakers have pointedly brought out the problems that are being faced, not only by the consultants or the constructors, but the society at large. Now, what is our situation? After a pandemic, every country is trying to unleash a development spree by which they can make up for the losses due to pandemic. India wants to make a 5 trillion economy. USA has sanctioned $3 trillion for immediate investment in infrastructure. Similarly, every other country is doing the same. Now, we have only one earth. The resources are limited. And resource does not mean only finance. Resource means the physical resources. For construction, we know we require stone, we require sand, we require cement, and all of those have got to come from this single world. And when everybody is trying to enhance their development, there will be tremendous source problem in the source. And to carry on development in this situation, where everybody will be running out of resources, where the supply chain will fail, in that case, we have got to look at it globally, not as one country. And the contractual changes that we are talking about, Mr. Ajit Gulabchand initiated this, Mr. Datta pointed out, and we all feel that our contracts have to be revised. But how the contracts have to be revised? You have got to, first of all, provide for this uncertainty. In a pandemic-like situation, or in an unprecedented flood and Amphan and drought, it is the society which has to take charge of this loss. You cannot pass it on to the contractor or the consultant or the local authority. It has got to be, and it has to be built in the contract, not by our contract, but by FIDIC, or for that matter, every single global contract has to be revised. The other important feature is the sustainability. Every project that we think about today has to be made sustainable. And we have got to think broadly in terms of sustainability. You know, when we select consultant and contractor, it is not only the experience in that particular type of construction, but they must have experience how to make their projects sustainable. Every professional that comes in, every agency that comes in has to think about sustainability, and then only we shall be able to meet this type of uncertain situation. You know, it has to be a global thinking. We have got to spread this up. FIDIC has started thinking, but we have got to give them further incentive. And every government in the world has to think in terms how this nature of uncertainty which is being unleashed on our society has to be handled. We have got to think larger, we have to think global, and one of the features which Mr. Datta mentioned, that we have got to think together. It is not the authority versus the constructor versus the consultant. It is the authority, the constructor, and the consultant together. They have got to coordinate, they have got to give their thoughts together, and there has to be a total coordination amongst all the parties, and thereby our solutions have got to come. We are already delayed, so I will finish my presentation here. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Ghoshal, for your crisp and very pertinent observations. Now, we don't have many queries in our question and answer box, only observations. We have observations from our senior members of CEI, and Mr. Vijay Nalkari said that there has been a lot of appreciation of Mr. Gulabchand's deliberation, and people have said, Mr. Mal has said that, one of our very senior members, he said that what was possible in Mumbai Pune Expressway through the active intervention and the governance of MSRDC, if we can bring about that kind of culture today, things may be much better going forward. As well as there is an observation from one Mr. S.K. Bose. He says that the professionalism and the profiteering attitude of all the players should not take precedence over the seriousness and professionalism of the sector. Now, before I conclude, I have been following the deliberations quite intently, and there is one question I would like to ask Mr. Pandey first. That what is Mr. Pandey still there? Hello.
Chair.
Pandey.
Yeah, I am here.
Okay, so Pandey, my one query to you is, how do you propose, how does NHAI for one organization, take an example, do you propose to award work to consultant and contractors in such a huge, program? I mean, within such a short time, what is the plan? What is your thinking there? How will you be able to award contracts to different, agencies and delivery providers to see that the end results are acceptable and in time without going into quality problem and delays? I mean, it's a huge task. What is the thinking of the government, NHI, sir? Can you just give us a idea? I mean, it's
Yeah,
mind-boggling the kind of investment and plan that is being thought of.
may I respond now?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, two things, briefly before directly answering to your question. In nutshell, a few points have been raised. One is from the contractor side, that is about the risk sharing model. Let me tell you, all our contracts are evolving contracts, and we go on discussing the profession and go on modifying the contract documents. Recently, we have modified the contract document for BOT projects, and one of the biggest risks in the BOT projects is projection of traffic for 30 years. What we did it, now we modified it. After every 5th year, we'll take the actual traffic, and then the modification in the concession period will be made accordingly. So we are not doing it for the BOT alone, we are doing for all. Now, one of the points raised about the poor finances of the consultant because of the selection of key personnel or because of the extension of time and all those. I'll tell you broadly, we have proposed major modification in the document, and these major modification covers, number one, say for example, movement by original time of completion is over, consultant will be free to replace all the key personals. No reduction in the remuneration. Number two, deemed approvals, because their payments are linked with the approval of the authority. It has been the experience of the industry that we are taking longer time. What we did is we are specifying a time. If I have given the approvals, it will be fine. Otherwise, it will be deemed approval and his amount will be paid. There is every possibility that I have it has covered under deemed approval, and I may ask for further modification. So built-in COS. Say for example, I am asking you to do 4-lane instead of 4-lane, 6-lane. There is a provision made in the contract document. If 4 to 6 lane is to be done, how you will be paid. Similarly, if I'll ask from BOT to EPC, EP2 to HAM, how we will go on paying, everything has been defined. So no COS approval is required. It is all built in. Certain points have been raised. Of course, we have not covered those in our modification. I have taken a note of that, and I'll request the organizer to send me the presentation. We'll try to cover all those. One of the points raised by Mr. Gulab Chandani was about the dispute resolution. I can only share my experience about the dispute resolution. We have, when we modified the document, we again introduced the provision of DRB and the process of conciliation. In NHAI, we have taken up conciliation in a big way, and again, let me tell you, we have resolved dispute worth 35,000 crore rupees by net payout of 10,000. Process is very simple. It takes not more than, because maximum number of sittings are 6. There are conciliation committees which are headed by the independent experts. There are 3 committees. Contractor, concessionaire, consultant are free to choose any. They can project their case. We'll project our case, and within 6 hearing, we try to resolve all these. So we are proactive. We are open to suggestion. Whatever suggestions are from the industry, we are will welcome them. Try to answer whatever best way we can do it. But at the same time, as the public servant, it is our responsibility to see to it that whatever modification we are making, it should lead to a open, transparent, and just kind of system. That is what the limitation in which we are working. But I'll welcome all suggestions. Try to incorporate in the modification in our next version of the documents. Thank you very much.
One observation from my point of view is that we have heard Mr. Kullan Ghosh about, and we all know the difficulties in actually preparing the land acquisition plan and the delays in the DPR preparation because of that. Now that is a complete, preparation of LA plan is a completely different area of expertise. But can you not take that activity, that part of the DPR preparation out of the engineering consultants' scope and engage agencies who are competent? Like this has been done by MSRTC for the Nagpur-Mumbai Expressway. They formed another cell within MSRTC led by a retired DLRO officer, and a separate team was formed for the land acquisition. And the engineering consultants were busy focusing on the actual technical part and the engineering part. Is it not possible to actually give the work to the agency best suited for that work?
I'll tell you, earlier this was the provision, and we were doing like this. But in this process, what happens? First, you have to do land acquisition. It's a 2 years process and a kind of time consuming. Apart from that, the problem was coordination between the agency who is prepared the land acquisition and the land acquisition plan, and the other is who is preparing the engineering reports. So what was thought is, when I can engage two agencies to avoid coordination and all kind of complication among the two agencies, why should I not pay to the consultant? Let him appoint an expert agency who can do land acquisition for them. And with this thinking, what we did is all this land acquisition, etc., were brought in the ambit of the DPR preparation. That is the whole idea. The whole idea was, let there be one agency. He will be paid for the work they are being attending to. Let them engage an agency. So I'll have only one agency to answer for any kind of mismatch. Otherwise, when we engaging two agencies, there were a number of instances where there were mismatch and led to delay in implementation of the projects. That is the only background on which we included this as one part.
I think one solution could be that right now, I don't think you allow JV or consortium in the DPR consultancy work. If you allow consortium, then the main consultant can engage officially another land acquisition environmental agency and come under one umbrella. So if you allow JV consortium in the PMC supervision, but you don't allow JV consortium in the DPR. If you want the main consultant to engage other agencies, please think of allowing JV consortium or consortium in that under that particular scope.
Mr. Said,
Yes.
can I have
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because I want to leave, so I want to make 2-3 points in the context of what Mr. Pandey said. I must say that NHI is doing all its best in different ways to find solutions because they're interested in the speed of work and therefore they try to solve problems. Yet, there's an endemic problem within the system of all government agencies. First is, it is not the question whether things are in the agreement or not. You can have the best of agreements created. Take, for example, you have arbitration. There's an act. And the act says this is final and binding. You cannot appeal against it. It is only to be challenged under very few things: fraud, complete falsehood, or a very major public policy violation. But by using that, you don't pay. So what is the use? Arbitrations which are working everywhere else in the world. If you take any contract, all the issues get resolved at the engineer level. Then if only few go to arbitration and only 2% of that go to courts. Whereas here, almost everything goes to court. So the basic point is there a firm internal practice and robust practice? We will not challenge these things. We will, like they are doing it with the conciliation. That was the conciliation. The committee sits and they come to a conclusion, they follow it up and pay. So that sort of a philosophy needs first to come into the picture. Second is, when it comes to FIDIC, it's true they are free to modify the contract as they like, but you can take the World Bank contract for FIDIC because that has been modified for developing countries like India. And in India, the same World Bank modified FIDIC has worked from municipality of Bombay to the irrigation department of Andhra to the Jilla Parishad of Kerala. Everywhere you go, it works. But when independently each agency is asked, they say, no, ours has to be a unique contract. I think this can be standardized throughout the country based on FIDIC, but taking more into consideration World Bank, which discusses the issues of developing countries or what emerging markets, whatever word you like. Then the last thing I would like to tell Mr. Pandey, when we talk of capacity building, we always seem to concentrate on the capacity of contractors to build. That is not the only capacity. The whole financing capacity of the country must exist. How are we going to finance long-term so many things? The ability of the owners of the projects also to have sufficient money to build those projects, as well as capacity to come out with DPRs fast enough, accurate DPRs that will not trouble everybody later on. All these capacities have to be taken. Some are not in the hands of the client. The NHI will not be able to do everything because your banking system is woefully inadequate for this sort of a thing. And we will need to change that. So bringing it to the notice of Finance Ministry that we need a better access to money, long-term money, and therefore systems need to be created is also part of building capacity. And these are the few points I would like to make in addition to what I said in the context of what Mr. Pandey said.
We are close to 7 o'clock. I'll just take 2 minutes to kind of run through some of the concluding points I have noted down, just for everybody's consideration. I would say that we all agree to one thing, that to make this kind of program really possible and realistic, we must have this kind of a situation where, number one, all parties must work as partners. This is most important. All parties must work in partnership. Number two, the contract terms and conditions must be specific and equitable. Number three, the capacity building of consultants and contractors as well as the client is imperative. Number four, for that, I mean, even the mid-level and sub-professional level people should be evaluated, because only the key personnel are being evaluated. They are holding the shots, calling the shots and holding all the companies to ransom. Now, number four is there is a trust deficit which must go. Everybody must work in the same kind of spirit of creation and nation building. Number four, dispute resolution must be in the accepted formats like FIDIC, World Bank contracts based on FIDIC, as Mr. Gulabsan said, and the DAB, District Adjudication Board, promoted by FIDIC, where the parties, the board is involved right from the beginning of the project, so they are able to solve the problems or resolve dispute as the project goes on. Number six is external borrowing must be made easy to fund this kind of large program, and a monitoring committee comprising all the stakeholders to see that the program goes on as planned and midterm corrections, if necessary, are implemented. And finally, we believe that there needs to be a prioritized investment plan. Everything cannot be done together right now. In all these 5-6 years, you have to prioritize the projects. You have to see which can wait for the next year or a year after that, and start with the ones. Unless prioritization is done, there will be huge backlog, and there will be a funneling effect, and we'll end up in completely stagnation of the program. So these are few points I have noted. If you have some 1 or 2 points, I will note down, and then we can circulate this as part of this webinar and see how things are taken forward by all of us in our own capacity. If you want to add anything, otherwise I'll just thank all the speakers and the panelists for joining this webinar, and all the participants who have, and it's been almost 2.5 hours. It was inevitable with the kind of discussions we were expecting. We thank all the panelists and the organizers, CEA of course, and most particularly Readers Association of India for being partners here. And we hope to hold such interactive and interesting webinars in future. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Good night. Good evening. Are we good to go? Are we? Hello.
Are we finished? Are we closing down, or somebody is going to speak? Shall we formally close it?